Hello. You'll notice that I have some bags around me. These are all filled with face masks. Recently, the governor of Oregon said that she wanted us to wear face masks every time we go out into the public. Our ladies at church have made several of them, and we would love for you to come by the hub here and pick yours up. We have children's, we have adults, we have plenty for you, and they're making more. They all have the interfacing material in them that will block the individual viruses from getting in. So you can use those, and I want you to know we have them for you, and we want you to use them. So please keep that in mind. Yesterday I read to you from 1 Corinthians 9, and the specific verse that Paul said, as I read it, there was a part that kind of jumped out. And I had another friend comment on it to me yesterday to look at it in another way. In 1 Corinthians 9 and verse 22, Paul said, I have become all things to all men so that by all possible means I might save some. That I might save some. I'm going to do all things possible in order to save some. It's kind of interesting when you look at the economics of a human life as it relates to what we're going through. There's a debate going on. Should we open up the economy? Should we start all the businesses again, get all the schools going, and allow COVID-19 to simply have its way with the weak of our number? What's the value of a human life? Kind of looked it up. It's interesting. The U.S. Office of Management and Budget actually does that all the time. For instance, when they took the legal limit on miles per hour, what we call speed limit, when they changed that from 55 to 65, they knew that they were going to have some cost involved in changing the signs. They were also going to have some cost in human life. There would be more wrecks. They didn't know how many, but they knew there would be more. And they also knew that it would cut the amount of time that people were on the road because they could go faster. And so they looked it all up, and they decided that on a per person basis, that each death was going to be worth about $165,000. That's what it would cost, each death. And they decided that it was worth it. Kind of an interesting judgment call on their part. It was worth it. When they decided to put seat belts in, when they decided to cause cars to beep when the seat belt is not fastened, or backup cameras, and they looked at the cost of that versus the cost of losing a life. They have to value the human life. And the U.S. Office of Management and Budget has determined that a human life is worth, depending on some variables, between $7 and $9 million. I think that's pretty amazing. Paul said 2,000 years ago that he was doing everything he could so that by all possible means he might save some. And he was talking about their souls. But right now, the debate is going on as to what should we do to save these souls, to save these humans. Should we let the economy go back to being normal, knowing that there's going to be X number of loss, because they're just the weak, and they're the ones that are already sick. Their immune systems are not very good anyway. Should we let those people just go ahead and die? I even heard of a person that said this was God doing it to us so that the weak would be taken out of the way. To me, that's such a sad way of looking at this. Um, we're all having to endure some hardship, some more than others. Some have lost a great deal of their financial wherewithal. Others are just inconvenienced. But I believe that we have to value human life. And we have to have an attitude that says we're going to do everything we can do in the knowledge that we're going to save some. One example of this that I thought was pretty neat, a doctor in New York was called to the ICU because one of her patients had a blood oxygen level of 85%, which was pretty low. You want it up in the 90s. They called her to rush to the hospital to get there because of one of her patients that was nearing death. Because so many of the patients that have the coronavirus die from what they call ARDS, which stands for Acute Respiratory Distress Syndrome. They die from ARDS. They can't get the oxygen in. But she had learned something. And so she suggested while she was on her way to the hospital to simply turn the patient over onto his stomach. Because they had some testing done that showed the oxygen content of the blood increased when you turned a patient over. And they turned this patient over and called her back and said, the oxygen content has gone from 85% all the way up to 98%. You don't even need to come in. I think it's interesting when we hear some of those stories. Now they're turning these patients over on their stomachs into what they call the prone position because they're learning. I think we need to learn to trust our doctors, our hospitals, and as much as we can, even our government in what we're doing. We need to take care of what we can control. And when we look at the parts that we can't control, I think we need to develop the attitude that we're doing everything we can with the knowledge that we're going to get to save some. You take care. I'll talk to you again soon.